Quick reminder that the description has a link to a resource website that you can use to help contribute to ongoing Black Lives Matter organizations. You can do a myriad of things like donate to bail funds or sign petitions, all of which go a long way to fighting systemic racism. Thank you very much for your time. Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. So, yeah, we're at 700 subscribers. I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm gonna find something to say. I am scripting this after all, but having said this 6 times in the past, it's hard not to feel like I'm just repeating myself over and over again. Hopefully someday soon I'll be able to find the words or actions that'll properly express just how grateful I am, but until such times, to all the new arrivals who've decided to come along on this journey, to all of you who've stuck around with me so far, just thank you so much. And a new milestone means a new subscriber special, and this one's a bit of a doozy. Fun trivia here. Did you know that out of 2 decades of Yu-Gi-Oh releases, with more than 10,000 unique cards in circulation, only 67 of them are monsters with 700 attack? 54 if you cut out all the normal monsters. I bring this up because this is the smallest pool that we've ever worked with so far, so we're about to see some wild picks. So, without further ado, I present to you GoldenNova's top 10 monsters with 700 attack points. But first, some housekeeping. To keep this video compliant with the rules and regulations laid out by the Online Opinions Protection Services, OOPS requires me to preface any top 10 video with the disclaimer that the content, and the sequencing thereof, is based solely on my own opinion. While power level and historical context do play a part in said opinion, they'll be graded alongside other ephemeral qualities, like silliness, coolness, and their performance in the Fitness Gram Pacer test, a multi-stage aerobic capacity test that gets progressively more difficult as it continues. The 20-meter pacer also, quick reminder to please subscribe and like if you've enjoyed my content so far. These videos are a celebration of how far we've come, and there's still a long way to go yet. Thank you very much for your help, and with that out of the way, let's move on to the list. Honorary mention, Frog the Jam. Okay, yeah, it's been eroded, but you can't hide the history of this lump of... well, I guess it's slime now. Presumably mistranslated upon its initial release in the United States, as part of a McDonald's promotion no less, this innocuous card would force every piece of Frog support to be released thereafter in the TCG to be printed with the reminder text, "Except Frog the Jam." But I can't really blame the translation team on this one. Frog the Jam was released 6 years before any other Frog cards had been introduced, and if you've come to the conclusion of using this flavor text, well, what could be the issue? It's not like frogs are ever going to be an archetype, much less one that becomes so popular that it, I don't know, becomes the backbone of one of the game's most infamous FTKs, or attracts fans because of how inherently silly it is to beat your opponent with frogs while still being a legit good deck, to the point where it's a real contender in a create a card poll. That could never happen. Right? Number 10, Daruma Dropper. Until making this list, I'd never heard of this card. Which, I mean, isn't too terrible of a surprise. It only just came out earlier this year in Ignition Assault, but it's got such a cool effect that I'm surprised it hasn't made its way into something. Let me read the effect real quick to make sure we're all on the same page here. As a quick effect, you can detach 1 material from an Xyz monster you control, then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, and change its attack to 0 until the end of the turn. If an Xyz monster you control would activate an effect by detaching a material or materials, except the turn this card is sent to the grave, you can banish this card from your grave instead of one of those material. You can only use each effective Daruma Dropper once per turn. So, yeah, it's not going to be breaking any games anytime soon, but it's a pretty cool effect for any Xyz deck, especially those that are troubled in the attack department. I look forward to seeing this card come out of bulk boxes a few years from now, because it fulfills a very particular niche, like, I don't know, dropping Machina Citadel's destruction target to 0 so it doesn't blast anything. Oh, or dropping Elemental Hero Absolute Zero's attack down to where it said it would be in the card name. Seriously, do designers even care about consistency between card identity and mechanics? Number 9, Ancient Warrior Eccentric Jing. If ever there was an archetype that needed a guide, it's Ancient Warriors. There are a lot of disparate effects and play sequences across a variety of attributes and levels, and while the deck has an extra deck monster, I wouldn't call it a boss monster per se, which is alien to me. Normally the standout card of a theme, the whole reason to play it, is situated in the extra deck, so without that kind of anchor it can be kind of hard to map the whole deck out in your head. But despite that, I look forward to a time where I can sit down and really study this theme, and from what I can tell, Eccentric Jing is pretty important. A number of Ancient Warrior continuous spells and traps have effects that activate, not when played, but when sent from the field to the grave. And Jing isn't unique in being able to enable these effects, but they are good at maintaining their sustainability. While the other warriors of the Three Kingdoms use those resources to grab monsters from the deck or lower opposing attack values, Jing sends those continuous spells and traps to the grave to add a differently named Ancient Warrior spell or trap from the grave back to the hand, allowing you to loop through them to get back just the right continuous, activated, or triggered effect you need when you need it. And on top of that, well, I kind of wish I had a little bit of trivia from the book these characters are based off to end this segment, but dang it, Romance of the Three Kingdoms is dense. I'm gonna do some reading in the background to see if I can find something fun. I'll try to check back in later. Number 8, Magician's Robe. Doubling as a nice piece of Dark Magician support and a great addition to your cosplay repertoire, Magician's Robe is part of the support released for the Ultimate Wizard in terms of attack and defense in the Dark Illusion. The core theme among these cards is activating spells and traps during your opponent's turn to gain benefits, giving you a bonus for always having a trick up your sleeve. Magician's Robe, in my experience, is the least popular among them, which really bites because it does what so few cards in the archetype can manage, actually summon Dark Magician from the deck. Just about every other card that can do that has you jumping through some ridiculous hoops. Like, Dark Magic Curtain locks you out of any other summon for the entire turn, and Magician Souls destroys your wallet the second you think about using it. But Robes can do it at the cost of a discard, and while you would much rather have it in defense position than normal summon it in pass, you can summon it out of your grave by activating a spell or trap during your opponent's turn. You know, the thing you're supposed to be doing in this build anyway. The real shame here is that, while the idea of playing cards during your opponent's turn feels like a very big-brained move, and many other decks have had success with this playstyle in the past, it just doesn't manifest as well in Yugi's loadout. But, out of all their available cards, it is the best at what it does, and because of that, it certainly deserves its spot on the list. Now, if only they got artwork that didn't look like they put an arcane filter on a photo of this version of Dark Magician. Number 7. It's number 7, Lucky Straight. Oh, I'm sorry, this is entirely for the joke, but I couldn't help it. Like, you could make something useful like a Big Eye or a Draco Sack, but no, make the dice rolling one that needs an extra material. But no, I actually do have a fun story with this one. Long ago, back before even Link monsters were a thing, there was someone at my locals who ran mermails, and ran Lucky Straight in their extra, and it was surprisingly versatile. I mean, not in terms of raw game mechanics, heavens no, but they could use it in one of two ways. Either they could style on their opponent if they got that far ahead in the game, or it was a card they could legit go into against one of the newer kids if they ever got paired together. The idea was that Mermails versus bulk commons.deck wasn't even a game, it was just an algorithm to see how fast Mermails could win. But with Lucky Straight, it was a card they could sink resources into that wasn't super good, but it was much more fun and entertaining to sit across than watching the long combo lines that Atlantean Mermails were capable of. So it goes to show that even if a card is absolutely unplayable from a competitive standpoint, or even from a casual one, a lot of cards you might never have tried can have redeeming value. Oh, Snake Eyes! Oh, never mind, this card sucks. Number 6, Noble Dragon Magician. Pendulum summoning had a rough start. Most of the generic monsters were normal pendulums with mediocre effects and even less impressive scales, and the only monsters with scales worth a darn required such a specific setup that you had to run Apex Avian to make it worth it. Not that we've stopped obsessing over them or anything, but as new mechanics are like to do, they take about a year or so of play before the kitty gloves start coming off. And smack dab in the middle of the second core set cycle of the Pendulum era, we got the Master of Pendulum structure deck, jam-packed with cards that would see play in Pendulum Magician decks for years to come. Noble Dragon Magician was not one of them, but those other cards don't have 700 attack, so they don't get to be on the list today. See, the game, even now, only has 9 Pendulum tuners, and while Noble Dragon isn't the first, the honor for that goes to Luster Pendulum, you can start seeing the developers exploring the design space. Tribute and Synchro Summoning were Pendulum's best companions, what with the reusable monsters and all, so they had to be careful with what they allowed, lest they blow the top off an entire format. I mean, they ended up doing that anyway when Performage Performapal started running the scene in the next core set, but that's besides the point. Noble Dragon Magician represents the times in the game that I love the most, when boundaries are pushed in new and interesting ways, a time where it seems like anything and everything is possible. Well, except for Doriato Turbo, sorry. Number 5. Flying Sea. When it comes to anti-meta cards, there's no series quite as all or nothing as the Seas. Max C got the number 1 slot in our 500 attack video, and for good reason. When you warp several formats around you, you deserve to live in notoriety. But while there are some absolute stinkers like Shining Black Sea or Confronting the Sea, Flying Sea is not one of them. Releasing alongside archetypes like Bujins, updated Harpies, and Girja, Flying Sea punished a format that forgot the old ways of tribute and synchro summoning by giving your opponent a little pest whenever they tried to go off. The design here is actually inspired. It stops your opponent from doing an important game action, but unless you have a way to bounce it back to your hand, or bypass it entirely, you have to destroy Flying Sea, giving your opponent the opportunity to Xyz summon again, but only after you've had your chance to build your board. It's probably one of the most balanced ways to make a floodgate. But as formats changed and diversified, it became less and less useful to summon the bug, and when link summoning hit the game, it was too easy to just link it off, so it's seen virtually zero play ever since. Still, I'm enamored with the design, and I wish more stun cards were like this, generic and lasts just long enough to balance things out. Its impeccable design is matched only by how accurate the art portrays seeing one of these flying nasties showing up in your kitchen. Number 4. Quickdraw Synchron. If Pendulum was limited early on by the lack of good scales and effects, then Synchros were limited by a number of material requirements, the worst of which being specific tuners. Quickdraw Synchron was introduced to alleviate this, allowing you to run a Yusei deck while allowing you to go into the Warrior Synchro monsters that most fit the situation and not the tuners that you had access to at the time. Discarding a monster wasn't even that bad, because you could use ones that had great grave effects to set up for later turns. But let's be real, despite the very narrow restriction of only letting you use it for Synchron-related Synchro monsters, you didn't use it for that. I didn't use it for that. None of us used it for that. It was for Tzolkin. Ultimaya freaking Tzolkin. The level 12 monster with 0 stars. The card that lets you synchro summon a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon with 10 levels. If your deck has level 5 monsters, you're obligated to consider running this in your deck just for the opportunity that it allows. Heck, I've seen Thunder Dragons running it now. Nothing gets the Megalovania playing faster than watching one of their combos go off with a Crystal Wing warding off any errant Nibirus. And all this power, all this destructive synchro energy, all comes from what amounts to a traffic light in a Clint Eastwood cosplay. Number 3. Morphing Jar. It's interesting comparing the similarities and differences between card games, seeing how certain universal mechanics are treated and what new ones arise to meet the needs of the game. For instance, Yu-Gi-Oh's trend of having showcase monsters that make or break your deck are facilitated by the extra deck, while Magic's emphasis on personalizing your playstyle manifests in the different colors of mana. Despite these differences, a number of parallels can still be found, and it's really cool to see how they end up being portrayed in their respective games. Take, for instance, Wheel Effects. Named for the card Wheel of Fortune, the idea is that wheel effects have all players discard their hand, then draw up to a particular amount. While these effects are very powerful in Magic, they aren't unheard of. Morphing Jar, on the other hand, is a wheel effect with a 1-turn delay on it because it's a flip monster, and it's only been taken from Forbidden to Limited in the last few years. And honestly, considering where the game is, I don't blame them. With how powerful both the Grave and Drawing are, being able to dump anything you want while playing out all your best cards with little to no opportunity cost is outrageous. But then we have another way of looking at it that's less mechanics driven and more players driven. Deck building. In Magic, wheel effects are seen as very powerful, and any deck that can run them should very seriously consider using them. But despite having no restrictions whatsoever, no one plays Morphing Jar because waiting that one turn really is that much of a detriment. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so fast and frenetic that even an effect that could possibly put you at a +5 in card advantage isn't even considered playable by most standards. It's a specter of times long past, and while it's not good right now, just you wait for the designers to slip up just a little bit, and this grim grinning ghoul will be there to ruin your hand and your game. Number 2, Cross Sheep. Another cool thing I like seeing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is watching the different summoning methods try to support and mesh with one another. Pendulums and, well, anything was a no-brainer. Free material for just about anything? Sign me up. But it's when Links started doing this that things became pretty hit or miss. When they first came out, Links basically buried all the other mechanics, so any attempt going forward to synergize with them kind of felt like an apology. Like, oh, I'm so sorry, we didn't mean to make your entire mechanic pointless, Pendulums. Here, have Electromite. Oh, Synchros, I cannot put into words how much I regret what we've done to you. Here, have Halqifibrax. Because all that didn't blow up in anyone's faces now, did it? But recently, Cross Sheep has stepped up to be the support card that bridges the gap between Links and just about anything. Okay, realistically, it bridges the gap between Links and any fusion or ritual deck. Requiring just 2 monsters with different names, this fluffy fleece has been integral to a number of combos in recent memory, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Now, with that out of the way, where can I get one of those plush little diamond direwolves? Number 1. It's ridiculous that this card even exists. It was bad enough back when the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon and Megamorph combo was a thing. You might as well have been printing an OTK before archetypes were even a thing. And it could have just stayed banned forever. All it'll take is one monster. One errant fusion without the necessary restrictions to keep it from being abused, but for some reason they tempted fate and made it so that we could play it again today. Everyone, I present to you Cyber-Stein. I can't really point to a long history of meta relevance on this one, because after a few sets they knew how much of a bad idea it was to have this card exist. Last Warrior from Another Planet didn't have a lot of outs and is just plain not fun to play against. You can also access Exterio to shut off any undesirable spell or trap your opponent might throw at you at virtually 0 cost. And in recent years, the possibilities have gotten even worse. Though the life point cost may be steep, Cyber-Stein is still a 1-card Link 2, and any effect you can get out of it before making that Link 2 makes it all the better. Every single instant fusion target is viable here, including Thousand Eyes Restrict, which is really good at removing problem cards. All of the invoked monsters are fair game, but I think the most dangerous is Algetti's, removing a card on summon, and can do that every turn it's on the field. And Dragon Maid Shio doesn't even have to worry about not having been summoned properly, because they'll just shuffle themselves back into the extra after they negate a monster effect. There are a ton of cool and niche ways to use Cyber-Stein, and it will legit take just one single card to turn this into one of the most efficient play starters in the game. So for what it can do, and for what it's capable of in the future, I'm proud to announce that Cyber-Stein is the absolute best monster in Yu-Gi-Oh! With 700 attack. And that's the list. Do you have any monsters you feel should have made the cut? Maybe one you felt should have been ranked higher or lower? And is there anything you're looking forward to seeing on the channel in the future? Let me know in the comments, and once again, a big thank you to everyone who stuck with me so far. Every day there are people out there who see what I'm doing and want to help, and that does a good for me I don't know if I'll ever be able to properly express. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.